Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered what would happen if every person on Earth decided to withdraw all their money from the bank at the same time? It sounds crazy, right? Well, in today's video, we're diving deep into the possible chaos that would follow if this actually happened. Get ready for some serious financial consequences. Let's get into it. First, bank liquidity crisis. Let's start with the basics. In most countries, banks operate on what's called fractional reserve banking. What does that mean? Well, it means that banks don't keep all of your money in the vaults. Instead, they only keep a small percentage, sometimes as low as 10%, and they lend out the rest to borrowers. This helps the bank make a profit through interest and lending. But here's the problem. If everyone tried to withdraw all their money at once, banks simply wouldn't have enough cash on hand to cover all of those withdrawals. It's just physically impossible for banks to keep enough money in reserve for everyone, and that would lead to a liquidity crisis where banks can't meet the withdrawal demand. Second, bank shutdowns. As the demand for cash surges, the situation would quickly get out of hand. To prevent a total collapse, banks would likely be forced to shut down temporarily. Imagine going to your local bank and being told they can't give you any money because they've run out. This could happen on a massive scale, not just locally but globally. Governments might step in to freeze withdrawals to prevent further panic, which means people wouldn't be able to access their savings for days, weeks, or even longer. Third, panic and loss of confidence. As soon as people realize that banks can't pay them back, the panic would spread quickly. People would lose faith in the financial system entirely, and that lack of trust would create even more chaos. In a situation like this, we'd likely see people rushing to take out whatever cash they can, leading to empty bank vaults and long lines of people waiting to get their money out. Once people start seeing others withdrawing all their money, mass hysteria would follow. Everyone would be trying to get their hands on cash as quickly as possible, fearing that their money could disappear entirely. This would create a snowball effect, where the panic spreads faster than anyone can react. Fourth, stock market collapse. But it's not just banks that would be affected. The stock market would also take a massive hit. Investors, fearing a total economic collapse, would sell off their stocks in a panic. This could trigger a stock market crash, leading to massive losses in global markets. With no one confident in the economy, businesses could start shutting down, and investors would be pulling their money out of almost everything. The value of stocks and other assets would plummet, making it harder for people to get their money back or to even secure a living. 5. Hyperinflation and currency devaluation. As the panic continues to spread, governments might be forced to step in. To try and stabilize things, central banks may print more money to inject into the economy. Sounds like a quick fix, right? Well, printing more money can cause a massive problem. Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation occurs when there's too much money in circulation and not enough goods to buy. This results in prices soaring at an uncontrollable rate. Imagine going to the grocery store and seeing that a loaf of bread costs $50 or $100. This would hit everyday people the hardest, as their savings would lose value almost overnight. The national currency would collapse and prices for everyday goods would spiral out of control. 6. The risk of a global economic collapse. If this scenario continues to unfold, we're looking at the very real possibility of a global economic collapse. Countries with weaker economies would suffer the most, potentially leading to widespread recessions or even depressions. In a worst-case scenario, nations might default on their debts, which could lead to a financial meltdown across the world. Millions of people could lose their jobs, savings, and access to basic necessities. Governments would be forced to make tough choices, and widespread poverty could become the new normal. The global supply chain would also be disrupted, making it harder to import or export goods. The interconnectedness of the world economy would make this situation even worse. 7th, shift to alternative currencies. Now, people aren't stupid. They would look for ways to protect their wealth. In such a crisis, people would likely turn to alternative forms of currency. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum would see a huge surge in popularity. These digital currencies aren't controlled by any central authority, so they might become a safer bet when the traditional financial system collapses. Other forms of wealth, like precious metals, gold, silver, and real estate, could also see a spike in demand. People would flock to tangible assets that hold value and aren't reliant on a fragile banking system. Cashless systems might rise, and bartering could even make a comeback in some places. 8. Government intervention and new policies. Governments wouldn't just sit back and watch as the world crumbles. They would likely implement emergency measures to stabilize the situation. Bailouts, nationalizations of failing banks, and currency controls would be put into place. New financial regulations might emerge, aiming to prevent this kind of collapse in the future. Central banks would likely lower interest rates and inject money into the economy, but at that point, it might be too late to fix the damage. Countries would need to rebuild their financial systems from the ground up. This could involve drastic economic reforms, new forms of money, and stricter financial oversight. 9. Social and political instability. The effects wouldn't just be financial. As the economy collapses, social instability would follow. People who have lost their savings, jobs, and homes may take to the streets and protest. Riots and civil unrest could break out as people demand answers from their governments. This kind of crisis could even lead to a rise in political extremism as people look for scapegoats and leaders who promise drastic solutions. In extreme cases, governments might fall, and there could be power struggles between political factions. With basic needs and survival becoming the top priority, societal norms could break down entirely. So what happens if everyone in the world withdraws all their money from the bank at the same time? In short, complete financial chaos. We'd see bank failures, hyperinflation, economic collapse, and widespread social unrest. Governments would have to step in and attempt to stabilize things, but it could take years or even decades to recover. What if everyone withdrew their money from the banks? Imagine if everyone on Earth tried to take all their money out of the bank at the same time. Here's what would happen. 1. Banks would run out of cash. Banks only keep a small percentage of your money. They lend out the rest so they wouldn't have enough cash to give everyone their money back. 2. Banks would shut down to prevent total chaos. Banks would likely shut down and freeze withdrawals. You wouldn't be able to access your savings. 3. Panic would spread. People would panic, and the financial system would collapse. Stock markets would crash, and we could see hyperinflation. 4. Alternative currencies rise. In the chaos, people might turn to cryptocurrencies or gold to protect their wealth. 5th global economic crisis countries would face massive economic collapse, and governments would scramble to fix the damage. A global financial disaster. So, if everyone withdrew their money from the bank, it would cause a global financial disaster.